thought we never want that to happen again. So we said, you know what, peace is more important than liberty, than unity. Everything we can do to keep peace. We created international structures, the World Bank, and the United Nations, all in there to try to keep this over the next 2 generations, 3 to 4 generations. So the question is, when our crisis ends and we need to rebuild, what's the story? And kids in class get kind of excited about that. What is the story that I need to be ready to tell? Right? What does family look like? What does real womanhood, manhood, and youthhood look like? How can I make art to celebrate the true part of that, the true principles? There's a lot of options that we talk about. It could be the next story. But when they start to get this sense like they're part of a pretty incredible generation. And most people don't see that because they see the fragility, they see the anxiety, they see the safe spaces, right? And so we call that weak. Romance and heroes. We call that weak, right? Not understanding the long-term power that is in this generation. When they start to see that, they reframe their generation, their peers, their role in society. It really opens them up to want to work, to be ready when it's time for them to tell the story, to have the skills to do that. They need to learn to speak, they need to write. They're already sort of artists with painting or music or whatever that might be. But to really hone that talent, that's a pretty powerful intrinsic motivation. So I was going to bring in a couple of books that I get these ideas from to combine. One is The Fourth Turning. It's a book that talks about the generations and talks about the cycle. Another one is called Drive by Daniel Pink, where he talks about this extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. And how do we get away from carrots and sticks into love, right? Love is that intrinsic motivation. And he says there's really 3 things that we crave in order to find some intrinsic motivation. We crave autonomy. We want choice. We don't want the choices made for us. We want some flexibility, some options. We're happy to work within some structure, but it can't be so constraining that we just feel trapped. So if we can figure out a language of autonomy, and then we also want to master, we want to get really good at something that matters. Storytelling is a pretty powerful thing that matters, right? Our whole society could go better or worse depending on whether this generation comes through for us and they tell the right story. And then purpose, I want to be part of something that matters, that's meaningful. So if we can speak in this language, we can understand where we're coming from so we can reshape the vocabulary and just approach it a little bit differently. I think we can have a really powerful influence in motivating our youth. Yes?
It makes sense to me why our kids mostly fall into that artist category because it seems to me like they're missionaries and that they were built in to be missionaries because they're telling the story and they're healing with it and they're being flexible by knowing when to share it and who's ready, who's not. And because it's meaningful, it helps them, build in that authenticity and that truth, right? Therefore, it creates that emotional safety that maybe fosters, the spirit and all the things to come to flourish.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why they continue to change the age to younger and younger. I'm like, okay, well, let him go,
And my girls especially are bridge builders, right? Especially my oldest daughter, Laura. Like she got into the theater world and everyone was her friend. She could relate to a whole bunch of different types of people in all kinds of modes of society, right? but she was still able to keep her core values while loving where they were. Okay? It's amazing what they can do. Their sense of connection, their emotional bonding, just trying to figure out how do we heal the world when the time comes. It seems to me like that's innate in them, that ability. And I just think it's gonna be amazing what they do. All right, I don't wanna keep you guys too late tonight, but Brandon.
I'm just looking at this as a cycle, with the first, as they're laid out there, you can see how there's some correcting of extreme that's happening across the archetypes. But looking at the artists and going back to the prophets, I'm just trying to still iron out what is it that the prophets are correcting that got off with the artists.
Yeah, and I think this generation is actually reacting more to this generation. Because these three are really vying for supremacy in the leadership position, right? Where this one is kind of just in the background. Oh, that's nice, they're doing their little art, right? They're just quiet, they don't really make a lot of noise. So I think you're really seeing a pretty big, like, these guys stay in leadership positions longer than most. And then they start reacting to this. That's kind of my take on it. You see, visionary as opposed to systems. Systems kind of get, once the institutions start to break down, and it's all about the system, we need a totally new vision. We got to go over here.
Makes sense. Like you lose the sense of purpose in the system.
Right. And then we can become a lot more idealistic. Like, what could we build instead of that? What are our other options? Let's figure out something.
Maybe in response to what Jackie was saying, like, why are we teaching these guys? Maybe, you know how, like maybe our role is to teach them in a way that they have a story to tell. Like they're observing all of us, prophets, nomads, and heroes. They're observing what we're doing and how we're doing it, and then they come up with a story to tell because of that. Like we're providing the trial that they're healing from, and
Yeah, we're also part of the story. In another class, we could talk about what have been the other, alternative stories for all these previous turnings. What did we? Because the crisis is really a crisis where multiple stories are sort of vying for supremacy. Which story is going to win? And we finally pick one, and then we go with it. That'll take some more time, but we can have some time to finish. So, really good insight. I think we all do participate in the story because our generations fight it out, and then everything sort of needs to be picked up and rebuilt. And this generation tends to be part of that building. And later on generations start to have more influence. They'll have a role, and if they do their healthy role, then we have a really positive, they call this cyclone, it's a century, essentially, right? So the American Revolution is probably one of the most healthy cyclones that we've had. Since then, it's been less and less healthy. The last one I didn't think was really great after World War II. We've had some pretty big challenges. So we're due for an American Revolution type story. We need something that's really powerful, big, to kind of lift us out of where we are as a society. Yep.
What happens when, if they all become too fragile and break, though? We had a psychiatrist at our church, and he was just talking about this, and he was talking about all the kids these days, how they all want authenticity. They all want to feel authentic. They all want to feel connection. Like in that category, that's exactly what he described. But he was saying how they're also so fragile, they're like breaking and crumbling a little bit, which can be scary.
Yeah, so, Jackie, just read my diagram.
Thank you.
For the storyteller.
I was
right?
gonna ask.
So the shadow side of storytelling is this. Fragile base. Right? So, in my mind, there's a choice that they're gonna make. They're gonna either choose the storyteller, the healthy, or they're gonna choose the fragile side. And that choice happens in their education. So the way they get educated, they're gonna lean one way or the other. So if their education is about courage and conviction, right, if they've missed that lesson, they're over here.
Which maybe needs to come from the defenders that are like, you have courage and you can,
So
you know?
I just got chills when you said that, right? It's like, this is the message they need from us. Stand up, be courageous. What do you really believe? Let's figure out how to do that, right? Because when they start telling the story, if it's the right story, not a lot of people are gonna be happy about it. And they need to have the courage to stand and tell that story when, Samuel Lamanite's up on a wall, he's gotta tell a story. Whatever arrows and rocks are coming at them, they need to be ready and courageous, which is not maybe where most of their generation is, but those that are educated will be in that position. That's who they are. They'll rise up, carry that story that needs to be told.
And I think that that's why we are so grateful for SM, because from the very beginning, they teach him about their strengths and, who they are and, what is your purpose? I mean, what is your mission and how you're gonna carry that mission? What's your purpose? And so when they have that clear, that's the foundation to be open for those defenders to, get them going or lift them up. It's like, hey, remember, So I really like that because I know the girls have come with like different, things to say about lessons, like, oh, I'm a winner, or like, I really am really good about this, or really good about that, and it seems like they completely identify with it, and they can start seeing it by the way they behave, and they believe it, so it's ingrained in them. And so I think that's probably key to.
Yeah, and from the grandparents, right? What's good? What's bad? What's right? What's wrong? Those are really important messages that this generation has to teach them as well. And then, how do you sort of get out of, once you find belonging, how do you really know how to collaborate? How can you build something that will last for beyond your lifetime? Structures and a system. And you're gonna create something, a story, and that story needs to last for 2 or 3 generations from now.
I read a book a year or 2 ago called That Therapy that was really impactful on me about how these storytellers can fall into into that broken glass, and how we help make that happen. And I have gone back many times to this quote by Elder Packard where he says, true doctrine understood changes attitudes and behavior. The study of doctrines of the gospel will improve behavior quicker than a study of behavior will improve behavior. Preoccupation with unworthy behavior can lead to unworthy behavior. That is why we stress so forcefully the study of the doctrines of the gospel. And I feel like those who had moral authority, but it was, their compass was, not true north, it was this way, and those of us who were defending and then building these structures for behavior, and all of that was based on, and then we started telling these people, well, this is our study of behavior, and that study of behavior resulted in this cracking, crumbling weakness. And so if all of us mourners and defenders and builders can, you know, turn our compass true north again, based on the principles of the gospel, which is truth, then all of a sudden, we're teaching our kids true doctrine. And, you know, and that's changing their attitudes and behavior in a way that makes our class not break. You know, because I've read this opposite before, where I've said false doctrine, understood, changes attitudes and behavior. The study of, you know, false doctrines will decline behavior quicker than,
Oh, interesting.
and so I think to solve that problem, you know, we as defenders and builders and warners, we need to teach them the gospel. And truth in every regard, which I put under the umbrella of the gospel, whether it's scientific truth or mathematical, whatever the truth is, that's all under my umbrella of the gospel. It's not just be nice, it's all truth, you know. And then I think that's what makes our storytellers strong. They create good connections, they heal, they're really flexible, they create good belonging. I mean, it's like at our talent show. At our talent show, you know, I picture that talent show sometimes at a public school and I'm like, oh man, some kids might not get supported. At our school, that's not the case.
Yeah.
At our school, everybody's cheered for, and it's because they're getting taught, we're working really hard as teachers to teach them truth and goodness and to, you know, help them be able to tell that story in a way that does create meaning and belonging. And every single kid at that talent show, you know, it's really sweet. I mean, they're building each other, you know, and they're preparing themselves, and we're preparing them to heal from a crisis, you know.
Thanks for sharing that. This is so true. Great.
It's that age-old adage of whatever you feed will grow.
Yeah.
So it's like, what are we choosing to feed? Are we feeding the doctrinal truths and the moral compasses, or are we feeding all the other things that are going on, which is a lot, especially for these kids. They have everything at their fingertips. So what are we choosing to feed them with that?
Come in.
I was just thinking as well, looking at these different attributes, that it's not necessarily warn versus defend versus rebuild, but almost like an attempt to balance and temper where we're at, and looking how the Savior embodies the good of all four
Mhm.
and teaches and facilitates that type of temperance. Is it emotional safety in the absence of, well, like an appropriate system as a means to emotional safety, as well as structure and collaboration meaningfully can foster belonging, and emotional strength can come from a healthy form of independence. It's the balancing the individualism and collectivism, and he provides that model and guidance in being able to harmonize the four and accentuate the good that the four can bring.
Yeah, it's so true. It's more like this is a symphony,
Yeah.
right? You've got the brass, you got the drums, you got the flutes. Right? They each have a role, and at different times. Yeah, the flutes, right? You know, during the score, during the piece, there are times where you emphasize one a little bit more, you showcase one or the other, and all working together, we create a really powerful society that can last. You know, at some point, we're gonna figure this out. Right? Christ probably meant to be on the earth for us to really stop doing this cycle and just have a really powerful society that lasts, right?
I don't know if you said this right at the beginning, but is there like a title for this? What is the?
Yeah, so the book, there's a couple of historians that kind of saw this pattern and then written about it. It's called The Fourth Turning, is the name of the book.
So is that what this system would be called though?
So the model of
The
the
model
crisis
business.
at high, so this cyclical pattern, they talk about this, they name these archetypes, and they talk about it a little bit. Some of this, I've studied a lot, so I kind of made my own game of this, but the general pattern is from them. And then Daniel Pink on the autonomy, mastering purpose, and I'm trying to blend some things that I've read and taught. It really makes sense in my mind.
I'm just sorry. How about, anybody, if they wanna offer, back to the question of how to motivate our youth, like what are just some ideas that either have worked for you in the classroom or others in parenting, or inspirations they've thought of while sitting here, like of the best ways, most effective ways, or something we want to try to be able to motivate the artist?
Yeah, so that's kind of where I wanted to wrap up.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's a perfect segue. A wise man once told me that it's hard for the mind to absorb more than the seat can endure, and so I don't want us to be sitting too long. And I do want to kind of send it back to you guys. Right? We started this session with some questions, and I'm curious what insights or answers or thoughts have come to you as we've talked about this, as it relates to your stewardships. Is there something that you want to share that getting you to flow at home or intrinsic motivation? Any ideas that have come to you as you've been here?
I think I'm realizing, I had a moment during this session where I wanted to cry and I managed to hold it back. 'Cause something in me as a nomad was grieving at first what I was seeing here with the artists, like, oh, and just the epiphany of like, they're never gonna be like me, and that's somehow what I've been wanting inside. But practically, when I go home, I'm realizing that this is gonna take a lot more time because I am so efficiency based. I have to slow down. And just in doing that, I think I'll eliminate a lot of my problems. Like they'll feel more heard, they'll feel more connected to me, they'll feel like I care and they belong more to our family if I can just suppress my efficiency drive and take the time to provide a safe envelope for them.
Yeah, when you're standing up in front of them, the 20 of them in a class, right? Like, I just explained it. There's 4 steps. Just do it. It's okay. And I've got to do the same thing. I'm like, okay, how do I build meaning to this? Why should this matter to them? And so, I'll show videos of somebody talking about why should you learn to write? Because you can become dangerous if you learn to write really well. It's a Navy SEAL talking about, you wouldn't think that a Navy SEAL needs to know how to write, but if you lead troops, you have to write mission plans. You have to write honors for your men to do something well that they can get an award for it. And so he talked about if you learn how to write, you can be dangerous. And we think dangerous is like a negative connotation, but can we be dangerous for good? Yeah, right? That's this generation, right? They have that opportunity. So when we start to see, it's not just a writing assignment, you're working on a skill that you're gonna wanna have in 5 or 10 years and be really good at. And if you work at it, no one's really born as a great writer. It's something that if you'll put in the time, you can be just as accomplished as a writer as you are on the piano, or on the violin, or on the drums, or whatever they're really good at. If they start to understand that they have a mission, and one day that door is going to be open to them, and if they're ready, they're going to be able to walk through. If not, we have to hope that another door opens, right? So if they'll sacrifice now, if they'll invest the time now, when that day comes, that opportunity, they're gonna be there, they're gonna be ready, and they're gonna be able to say,
I feel like to me, it became really clear to focus first on my relationship with them, and then second, offer whatever in my moment defend category is strong within me. But that might be more receptive if I'm putting that relationship first. And so instead of focusing so much on the rule, focus on that relationship, make that connection, then bring about the rule or what is to be done or what is to be remembered, So it helped me keep that.
that's good to say.
One one thing that helps me, because I'm very much a realistic, independent efficiency. I also have some of the others too. But,
Oh, yeah, which ones?
no, but, I mean,
This is
but,
like
She
an
does,
AA
she has,
meeting, right?
she's an artist for real, so, yeah.
This is an Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yes.
no, but, oh, now I'm forgetting what I was gonna say.
Sorry.
Oh, one thing that helps me with my kids, I feel like, is that while I push all of those things, you know, gotta get our stuff, I play with them a lot. I color with them. I play games with them. I bike with them. I ski with them. I do whatever they're wanting to do, whatever their interests. I'll go play basketball with them. And while I'll be strict with them a lot of the time, they also know that I care a lot because I play with them.
And there's a time for work, there's a time for play.
Yeah,
And we make time for all of it, so.
yeah, we,
Work is work.
yeah, work together too.
Mhm.
But, and most of our play is type 2 play, like, the harder
The
Yeah,
kind that
it's
would
like-
throw me, that's the
It
kind.
results in broken arms and.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Concussions.
Yeah.
that is true. But we,
But you're efficient enough.
I'm efficient about it, yeah. We break lots of bones and we're real efficient. No, but,
Play hard.
that's been a huge thing for our family, I feel like, is a real focus on playing together. The other stuff comes easily, you know, the working together, because there's always jobs to do, you know? And making time to play together, that it has to be really intentional, because otherwise there isn't time to play, you know?
The saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, is what comes to mind. And that being with your kids and stuff, they know how much you care. So, okay, mom, now you can tell me what you know, type thing, is what comes to mind.
Just kind of adding on that and then segueing into something else, but this child psychiatrist, one of the biggest things that he emphasized on is one of the best things you could do as a parent is never stop playing with your children. And never use play as a punishment or discipline or everything. Just always never stop playing with your children. And then another thing that I was just going to mention that one of the things that our kids connect with Dano so much is that it's one of their favorite things is when we tuck him in at night and tell him good night. You know, I'm usually in there giving him a hug, good night, love you guys. But Dano will linger longer with them and you know, and they really get that connection with her, and then a lot of the stuff comes out and they're in that emotional safety zone, and there's just a lot more connection that seems like goes on during that time where she's in a hurry, but she knows she needs to sit and listen, and they feel like they have that precious time, so everybody's like, when is she coming into my room next?
He'll play, I'll linger.
So I think that's a really good point, right? Sometimes we can be a little bit hard on ourselves as parents, especially as nomads, right? So hopefully you found some things that you are doing that can really give you some open energy, focus. There's a reason why I felt to do that, to stay a little bit longer, even though it kind of goes against what I really want to do, right? But you start to see the power that few minutes has, and the currency that you can bank, right? Just by spending a few extra minutes.
Sorry.
Okay.
I just wanted to say one last thing. I just had noticed in my transition from younger kids who would snuggle me at bed to older kids who want me out of their face as fast as possible. I think it's been super hard for me in the beginning, but super important for their autonomy to be able to have other trusted adults in their circle besides just me. And at first that was so hurtful as a mom, because I wanted it all to be me. I wanted to be their therapist and their counselor and their safety and their flexibility and the one that played with them, and I wanted it selfishly to all be me, like that I was the final answer. But I'm grateful that I'm continuing to be taught that it's also really important for them to have other trusted adults. Like my son's seminary teacher, like changed his his life, his last year of school, and, you know, any other educators or leaders or grandparents or whoever. So I think that was one thing, as, actually feel like I'd probably fall right in my category in rebuild, but anyway, one thing for me that was super helpful to come to the realization that it doesn't actually all have to be, and I can be grateful for all the other good, you know, people in their circle that fall in the other categories, and it just is a testament that we all need each other. Like I agree that you could just draw a big wavelength through all of this and write Jesus and love, and it would all just work itself out. But anyway, that was just something from younger kids to older kids that was super, obviously still hard, but really important that they have good other
And
people.
hopefully, you know, this perspective might help you seek out certain heroes or nomads or prophets that you can kind of bring into their circle.
Or mine.
Right, that are showing these healthy parts of that generation. Any insights, Brandon?
I think so. Yeah, I realized a couple months ago, I can't remember what I was reading, but it helped me make sure I don't insult Clash Royale. Because there's something that happened in a class as these 6 students were playing it before the bell rang, and a comment was made, and I watched it happen, and it was within like a matter of seconds as they're telling how many crowns they have and some other things about the game, and it clicked like, oh, this is community for them.
Yeah.
They're able to identify themselves within this community and see points of connection with these other peers. And so I need to make sure I don't trivialize it, even though it's a game.
It's
And-
a total waste of time.
And there's some element I had my humbling moment when in college I came to Danielle and told her I just won the Super Bowl in Madden and realized, wait, I just accomplished nothing. But I don't know, just to respect what they have that's fostering these elements. I would be really curious, obviously because of the passage of time, you're going to have new technologies within this cycle, but to see what the present day technologies are doing in the artist's reality and fulfilling what they've done in like previous centuries, how that's impacting what they're able to do here. But sorry, the one other thought I had is on the meaning, is that sometimes as teachers we'll establish the lesson purpose up front and carry this assumption of like, I know you all care about
You
this.
get it now, right?
But if we were to pause and just hear from a few students, what meaning could this have in your life? If you drew closer to Jesus Christ, what does that translate into in your life right now? And one student may not feel it, but when they hear 2 or 3 others state it, they might feel it, or they might feel that respect for the other community members. Be like, okay, well, I want to help them get there, but we need to make it more overt and more the authenticity coming from their voice.
Okay, so technology is an interesting point. Right? The last artist generation, we call it the silent generation.
Hmm.
They were born between so leading up to World War II. So the heroes in World War II and the prophets that were generals, right? It's like they were sandwiched between these 2 very loud and very ambitious generations. And they started to tell the story of how childhood can be so healthy. So this is Dr. Seuss and Mr. Rogers' generation, right? But then they lost the story, I think mainly because radio came in, television came in. So we have the sitcoms from the 80s, my generation. If you contrast that with Leave It to Beaver, just a generation earlier, and see how fathers are portrayed. See how children in the 80s in those sitcoms were portrayed as wiser than their bumbling parents, right? And how the story of what a strong man, strong father, a confident father, wise woman, wise mother. That story was lost because of these loud voices and they used technology before the artists were really able to create that story. Right? It's just interesting to see how that really shifted things. So, you know, you get questions today that some people have struggle answering. What is a woman? Because we lost that story. The silent generation didn't keep it from previous generations, especially from the founding. Right? So
It's interesting hearing you say what you just did about the sitcom example, and you realize why my mother was especially opposed to us kids watching The Simpsons.
yeah,
And The Simpsons were an extreme form. Bart was super nomad,
same thing. Yeah.
but
Yeah, it's powerful when that generation harnesses the story. When they figure that out, and the American founding, that generation figured it out. And it's fun to kind of go back at that generation and see who that was, what were they doing, what's the story they were telling. Some of them were saying, oh, you know, we just got freedom for the men. What about women? You know, do we have a role in society now? What about, you know, right to vote? So the artists were really starting to tell that story to influence what was coming in the next cycle. So it's just kind of interesting to investigate. All right, you guys have any insights?
I was just looking at the pattern. I think it's really interesting. I don't have enough words to explain it, so just pretend. But it makes sense to me how a prophet, because of all of their ideas, would end up raising a nomad. And it actually makes sense that a nomad with their efficiency-driven life would raise heroes, where they would be building structures and systems, right? And it makes sense that then once you have this interesting collaboration happening, that's who would raise these artists that need that connection and belonging. That becomes so important to them. And then I think that honestly, it would make sense how the artist generation would then be raising the prophets, because they're telling that story. They would pass it on to their own children, and their children would be passionate about it because that was the story they were raised with, right? So it actually started to make sense who your children would be and who our children's children will be, right?
Yeah.
Like what will they be like?
Yeah, so when the prophets are born, it's high, it's
Mhm.
yeah, it's good.
It's fascinating.
This might be too why Jackson's sort of pushing back against that group, right?
Yeah. Right. Well, that's why I was asking it, is because wait, how can you get artists out of this, right? Like, how does that happen? Or I can see how you can get artists out of, you know, they're bucking the system, but I don't know.
All right, hopefully tonight was helpful. You got some ideas, some arrows in your quiver. Go back home and see what we can do
things
about
to think
motivating
about.
our youth. Intrinsically, you know,